Here are the headliners for this newscast. Who better to lead the fight against corruption than the Justice Minister himself? That's the reasoning behind the presidential office's choice for Prime Minister, but the opposition party begs to differ. After 4 long years, the defense chiefs of South Korea and Japan will finally sit down for talks. The likely topics of discussion include North Korea's threats and Japan's changing defense posture. 4,000 global participants exchange ideas in over 50 sessions on various topics at the 10th Jeju Forum, dedicated to promoting peace and prosperity in East Asia. All next on Primetime News. Hello and welcome to Primetime News on this Thursday, May 21st. I'm Daniel Choy.
And I'm Hwang Ji-hye. Thank you for joining us. We start off with the president's pick for Korea's new prime minister, her 6th choice for the job since taking office.
That's right, 6th. This nominee is the current Justice Minister Hwang Kyo-ahn. Our Park Ji-won has more on his credentials and the responses from rival parties.
The presidential office of Cheongwade said Hwang Kyo-ahn is the right person to lead its political reform and anti-corruption agenda. Senior presidential press secretary Kim Sang-woo said Hwang has a deep understanding of President Park's state affairs, and his quiet yet firm work ethic is considered appropriate for the job. The 58-year-old former chief prosecutor was appointed Minister of Justice in March 2013. Shortly after the Park Geun-hye administration took office. Over the last 2 years, political watchers say he has demonstrated good communication with the presidential office and implemented Park administration's policy directions. In a press conference following the announcement, the Justice Minister said he felt a deep sense of responsibility.
If I am given the opportunity to serve as the Prime Minister, I will make every effort to help the nation overcome current difficulties and make a leap forward. More than anything, I will focus on revitalizing the economy and stabilizing the people's livelihoods in order to rehabilitate the country.
The ruling Saenuri Party welcomed the nomination.
We expect Hwang to carry out political reforms and eradicate corruption based on rule of law. As Hwang has President Park's full confidence, and people's expectations are high. We hope he'll make the utmost effort to carry out his heavy responsibilities.
The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy offered some harsh criticism.
The nomination is unacceptable. Korea needs a prime minister who can integrate this nation, fragmented by President Park's failure to embrace opposing voices. Hwang is not a qualified nominee. He can't solve the problems that have piled up to create an economic crisis.
Both parties now vow to examine Hwang's fitness to be prime minister at an upcoming confirmation hearing. The nation's number 2 post has been empty for nearly a month after former Prime Minister Lee Wan-gu resigned over recent high-profile bribery allegations. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
And let's zoom into the latest on that bribery scandal. Prosecutors have decided to indict former Prime Minister Lee Wan-gu and Governor Hong Jun-pyo of South Gyeongsang-namdo Province. Neither man will be detained, but prosecutors have not yet said when formal charges will be filed. They cite security concerns, saying if collected evidence were made public, as happens when charges are filed, it may affect their investigation. Legal experts say the delay is strategic and they're likely to make their move when they've finished their investigations into the other 6 people suspected of receiving bribes from the late businessman Sung Wan-jong, the former chairman of Gyeongnam Enterprises. Now shifting gears to a new viral disease in Korea, the health officials today confirmed the country's 3rd case of Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, or the MERS virus. The patient is a 76-year-old man who shared a hospital ward with the first confirmed patient who contracted the disease after a trip to Bahrain. The health ministry says that those who had been in contact with the first patient are isolated and that it's also trying to discover how the virus spreads. There have been more than 1,000 MERS cases worldwide since it was identified in 2012. More than 40% of those cases ended in death as there's currently no cure or vaccine for the virus.
At last, they meet. South Korean and Japanese defense ministers are expected to get together next week. It's been 4 years since the two chiefs last sat down for a face-to-face talk. Our Na Young-young tells us more about the long overdue one-on-one.
Korean Defense Minister Han Min-gu and his Japanese counterpart Gen Nakatani will most likely meet on May 30th during the 14th Asia Security Summit in Singapore, more commonly known as the Shangri-La Defense Dialogue.
The two will discuss ways to deter North Korea's nuclear missile threats, issues related to the recent revision of the U.S.-Japan defense guideline, and how to better cooperate on the military front overall.
The revision to the defense guideline was signed by Washington and Tokyo last month, which opened up the possibility for Tokyo to support the U.S. military in case of war in Korea.
Korea has been very careful for Japanese military or self-defense forces coming to Korea or Korean peninsula for almost any reason. So that there are many issues to talk about between the two countries.
Those topics include detailing when and under what circumstances Seoul will permit aid from Tokyo's military, and also whether or to what extent the two countries will share military information. However, some experts insist the Shinzo Abe cabinet should first show sincerity in mending Seoul-Tokyo ties, which have been strained by Japan's repeated territorial claims to Korea's easternmost Dokdo Island and the issue of Japan's wartime atrocities. Given these tensions, the defense meeting comes at a very critical time, but whether they will achieve a breakthrough remains to be seen. Na Hyun-kyung, Arirang News.
A United Nations committee will soon take up the issue of North Korea's claim that it test-fired a ballistic missile from a submarine. The South Korean government said Thursday that it sent a letter to the North Korea Sanctions Committee under the UN Security Council requesting a formal investigation into Pyongyang's self-proclaimed missile launch and whether it violates UN resolutions. Similar requests were also submitted by the United States and Japan. Accordingly, the committee will soon launch a panel to investigate, and the findings will be reported to the Security Council. Earlier this month, the North said it had conducted a successful test of a submarine-launched ballistic missile, followed by reports saying the test was faked. First, they banned Ban Ki-moon from entering the joint inter-Korean complex, then adding insult to injury, claimed to have the ability to miniaturize nuclear weapons. We're talking about North Korea, of course. The hostility is nothing new. But what's really motivating the reclusive regime? Our Han Da-eun offers some insight.
Some experts say it could have been Ban's remarks urging North Korea to stop developing missiles in contravention of UN security resolutions. Others say the regime is trying to cover up reports speculating its submarine-launched ballistic missile is a fake. But most experts agree on one thing.
North Korea's political situation is very unstable. It would have been quite burdensome for the North to allow the visit of a high-profile figure like Ban Ki-moon at the moment. On top of its internal insecurity, Pyongyang is facing more pressure from China, which I think is forcing it to step up its hostility to show the world that it can stand alone.
However, North Korea's most recent nuclear boast isn't having that effect. Experts say it's just another bluff.
North Korea does not have the capability to miniaturize nuclear weapons yet. It is a technique that's almost impossible to attain after just 3 rounds of nuclear tests. I think they're getting closer to that stage, but not quite yet.
Pundits expect Kim Jong-un's bizarre diplomacy and rhetorical threats will continue as the regime is still politically unstable. Han Da-eun, Arirang News.
Coming back to South Korea, Korea and the U.S. will launch a combined combat division early next month to bolster their combat readiness against North Korean threats. The new division will comprise one South Korean brigade and the U.S. 2nd Infantry Division located north of Seoul. It will become the first combined military unit capable of carrying out combat missions since the Combined Field Army Command was disbanded back in 1992. The combined unit will be relocated to Pyeongtaek by the end of next year in accordance with a U.S.-based relocation plan. The Jeju Forum for Peace and Prosperity kicked off Thursday on Korea's southern resort island. The theme of this year's event, Towards a New Asia of Trust and Harmony. Our Hwang Ji-hye reports from Jeju.
With the region mired in historical and territorial disputes, the key mission at this year's Jeju Forum is promoting peace and common prosperity in East Asia. Former German Chancellor Gerhard Schröder, in his keynote speech on Thursday, described the foundation necessary for building trust and harmony in the region.
The tasks we are facing require a strong and effective multilateral system. I'm absolutely certain that intense regional cooperation between neighboring states is an important precondition for peace, development, and prosperity.
In a video message, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon called for more dialogue between Korea, Japan, and China, saying that trust and cooperation will bring about change in Asia. The forum's organizing committee hopes 4,000 participants from around the world will exchange ideas at the event.
I firmly believe that the 10th Jeju Forum will become a reservoir of intellectual discourses on peace, an incubator of practical ideas to enhance peace and important actor for peace. Through these efforts, Jeju seeks to serve as a platform for global peace.
With over 50 sessions on topics ranging from security issues to climate change, the forum runs through Friday. The organizers of the forum say that the event could turn the small island of Jeju into a powerful transmission point for messages of peace in East Asia. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News, Jeju.
Now, Korean exports might face a further downturn as global trade volume shrinks. And the strong Korean won is not helping. Our Connie Kim tells us more.
Global trade volume fell nearly 1.5% in the first quarter this year, marking the biggest on-quarter drop since 2009, when the country was hit hard by the global financial crisis. Industry sources, including Holland's CPB, or Central Planning Bureau for Economic Policy Analysis, say faltering global demand has caused a decline. Global imports fell 2.3% in the first 4 months of this year from the previous quarter. For export-reliant Korea, the biggest concern is reduced demand from emerging economies such as China, Russia, and India. The overall import volume for these growing economies dropped 4.8% over the same period. Emerging markets made up about 44% of Korea's outbound shipments last year. The strengthening of the Korean won against other currencies is another detrimental factor for the Korean export market. Against the Japanese yen, the won reached its highest level in over 7 years last month, hurting the price competitiveness of local exporters. Korean exports have been on a downward trend this year, and there's no sign of improvement. Experts say the country's traditional growth engine will remain stagnant this year, especially with sluggish demand in China, Korea's biggest trading partner. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
And Japan filed a complaint against Korea today at the World Trade Organization over Korea's import bans and additional testing regulations on Japanese food. Tokyo's Fisheries Ministry says that Seoul's requirements are against the WTO's sanitary agreement. Korea put the ban in place after the 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster. The two countries will now have to hold talks at the WTO, but if they fail to resolve the dispute within 60 days, Japan can ask the arbiter to rule on the case. Korea's so-called Eureka Day is unfolding in Seoul. Hundreds of domestic small and mid-sized companies looking for European partners are flocking to the event. Kwon So-ah reports.
Making connections. Representatives from more than 20 countries, mainly from Europe, have come together to exchange their tech knowledge and seek new partnerships, mainly with Korean SMEs. Founded in Europe in 1985, the Eureka organization aimed to raise the productivity and competitiveness of European businesses through technology and is especially dedicated to supporting R&D performance in SMEs. For those companies, the event's matchmaking sessions are a big draw.
All of these business people are holding face-to-face talks in the hope of finding their ideal partner and finding their chance to shout Eureka.
K&R Systems, a local firm, specializes in hydraulic components, robots, and bio-devices. Its second match of the day was a Turkish robotics maker. Given their shared expertise, there were high hopes for the meeting.
These events, especially Eureka events, are successful for us, and I think we will be a good partnership for the Korean companies about the R&D projects, and maybe later we have a good relations about our familiar products.
Robotel is an engineering company, so they are finding a leader of a Eureka project. But K&R is a novice. We are also the first time to join the Eureka. So there are something remain to find the applications, the topic. So we discussed lots of things about how to do or find topics all together, and we introduced lots of things in technical issues. So we share lots of things. Yeah. We have many times to do, many things to do. Yeah.
Successful matches like this are one of the reasons that Korea's Eureka membership has been extended till 2018. As a result, Korea will be part of the organization's 2020 roadmap to foster economic growth, competitiveness, and job creation. Kwon-soa, Arirang News.
To make the world more aware of the pain and suffering Japan inflicted on women during World War II, Arirang TV has invited roughly a dozen journalists from 11 countries to visit the House of Sharing just south of Seoul.
And the residence was built for Korean survivors of Japan's sexual slavery program. Our Kim Hyun-bin was there too, and he files this report.
한달에 군인은 40명 내지 50명 접근하는 거예요. 여러분 보시오. 한달에 우리 시간이 몇 시간 있는가? 한달에 시간이 24시간인데 40명, 50명 어떻게 잡습니까? 다 죽고 말지.
Lee Ok-sun was kidnapped by the Japanese when she was just 15 years old. Not long afterward, she was sent to China to serve as a comfort woman for the Japanese Imperial Army in July of 1942. Lee, who is now 89, is one of an estimated 200,000 comfort women from Korea and elsewhere who were forced into sexual slavery by the Japanese military before and during World War II.
There are only 53 comfort women still alive here in Korea, waiting to hear a sincere apology from the Japanese government.
Korea continues to demand a clear apology from Japan for its complicity in the sexual slavery issue, but Tokyo has so far refused. In an effort to raise awareness about the comfort woman issue around the world, Arirang TV has invited 11 journalists from as many countries to Korea this week to learn about the issue firsthand and hopefully share their experiences back in their home countries.
Japan should be teaching this history in its schools and textbooks. I believe that Japan should build a monument to the memory of the so-called comfort women and the suffering of sex slaves around the world on the grounds of the Imperial Palace in Tokyo. And it's only by stepping forward in meaningful ways that feel personal and emotional and heartfelt that Japan can begin to take additional steps to put this very painful history to rest.
The former comfort women in Korea say they will do everything possible to get Tokyo to deliver a sincere apology, and they urge Koreans to carry on the baton after they are gone.
당기도 이제는 해방된 데가 몇 해가 된 몇십 년이 됐는가 하는 거지. 이렇게 할머니들 다 죽지를 기다리는데 안 됩니다. 죽어도 이 문제를 꼭 해명해야 되죠.
Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
It's time now for the top international headlines. We connect to our Paul Yi at the News Center.
Our focus today, Islamic State militants seize control of the Syrian city of Palmyra. The world's biggest banks plead guilty to rigging the global market, and the American late-night talk show host David Letterman signs off for the last time after 33 years.
I can't believe we have to let him go, but it's time. Paul, let's begin in the Middle East. The Islamic State group has claimed a major victory in Syria after taking control of the city of Palmyra. How important is this territory?
Well, Palmyra is more than 200 kilometers northeast of the capital, Damascus, and is a strategic location because of its proximity to rich oil fields. But it's also widely considered one of the world's greatest archaeological sites. Following weeks of intense fighting, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said IS is now in complete control of the city after a full retreat by government forces. In response, the chief of Syrian Antiquities says hundreds of historic relics in Palmyra have been moved in an effort to save them from being destroyed.
These statues are now safe and in secure places, but the question is how to protect the beautiful cemeteries, temples, and other monuments that are present in the city. Imagine an archaeological city becomes a battlefield between criminals and the city's defenders. At the end of this, the Syrian people will not give up Palmyra.
Heavy shelling and gunfire has left many of the ancient city's cultural artifacts in ruin, some of which had dated back more than 3,000 years. The head of UNESCO said the destruction of Palmyra would not only be a war crime, but an enormous loss to humanity. And shifting to the United States, 6 of the world's biggest banks have been fined a total of nearly $6 billion for allegedly manipulating foreign currency markets. The settlement announced on Wednesday ends a massive investigation by American and British regulators. Under the deal, Citigroup, Barclays, JP Morgan Chase, and the Royal Bank of Scotland all pleaded guilty to the charges.
Simply put, exchange rates are prices to buy and sell currency. They should be set competitively, the same way prices are set in any market. Instead, the members of this cartel chat room conspired to gain unlawful profit by manipulating those exchange rates. The banks pleading guilty today are not just ordinary market participants. They are market makers.
UBS and Bank of America received immunity from authorities, but instead pled guilty to rigging the interest rate benchmark known as LIBOR. The U.S. Department of Justice said the fines are the largest ever imposed in an antitrust case. And finally, it's the end of an era. The veteran host of The Late Show, David Letterman, has signed off for the last time after being on the air for more than 3 decades. Letterman began hosting late-night talk show on CBS in August of 1993. Over the years, he's featured guests from movie stars to pop icons and even presidents. During the final broadcast on Wednesday, Letterman didn't shy away from his signature self-depreciating humor.
We've done over 6,000 shows. I was here for most of them, and I can tell you, a pretty high percentage of those shows just absolutely suck. Well, so now, and also, in light of all of this praise, merited or not, do me a favor, save a little for my funeral, all right?
Okay. A host of Hollywood's biggest celebrities came out to pay tribute to late-night icon, including Jim Carrey, Jerry Seinfeld, and Tina Fey, among others. Letterman will be handing the reins over to Stephen Colbert, who will start later this September. And that wraps up our look at international stories for now. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
It was a hot and sunny but breezy day today, and tomorrow should be even hotter, especially in the eastern parts of the country, which will see highs soaring above 30, and sunny skies will persist across the nation. And UV levels will continue to be high nationwide, but people in the northern parts of Chungcheongdo province need to beware that UV levels there could go up to extreme. So try to avoid being outdoors for too long, and if you're outside, apply apply a good amount of sunblock every 2 hours and be sure to drink plenty of water to stay hydrated. On that note, let's have a look at the readings for Friday. The afternoon high here in Seoul will climb up to 27, while Daegu and Gwangju rise to 31 and 29, and Busan will top out at 25 tomorrow afternoon. And as for the other regions, Daejeon and Jeju Island will see a high of 28 and 23, and Dokdo peaks at 25. Now the daytime highs are on the rise, and the brief heat wave we are having will continue through Buddha's birthday next Monday, which is a national holiday here in Korea. Well, that's all for the weather. Have a wonderful evening.
And that brings us to the end of our newscast. Thank you for staying with us. I'm Hwang Ji-hye.
And this is Daniel Choy. Thank you for tuning in. Do join us again, same time tomorrow. Good night.